All right, what up? What is up, everybody? You've reached Sam Shady Sports once again. Today, I wanted to talk about the somewhat breaking news that Doug Pederson is back once again. Um, in kind of an ironic twist, he's been hired in a job that he could have had last season. Urban Meyer was hired in Jacksonville and showed us all how not to coach the NFL, and was fired after a very short stay in Jacksonville. Doug Pederson was available in 2021. I don't believe he actually spoke with the Jaguars. In fact, I think he didn't interview with anybody last season, but it's just kind of strikes me as funny that they could have hired him from the beginning and had him coach up Trevor Lawrence rather than have him suffer through the disaster that Urban Meyer's first season in the NFL was. Um, so let's get into it. Uh, Regarded as a solid developer of quarterbacks from his time playing the position in the NFL, as well as with the World League of American Football and NFL Europe. Um, he spent, I think it was 14 years in the NFL, 15 years, I believe, playing professional football total. He landed with the Eagles in 1999, about 5 years before he retired as a player. He played from He played 2000 with Cleveland and then spent '01 to '04 with Green Bay, retiring in 2004. Immediately upon retiring, he joined the Calvary Baptist Academy as a head coach. Just going to show you how he was regarded as an offensive mind and a football mind in general. This was a private academy, so it's not as if he just walked into a regular public high school and got a job. This is the type of academy where kids go to create a future in football for themselves. And Pederson was one of the guys that helped them garner the name recognition that kids needed to want to go there, because he had the NFL resume that most coaches at that level just don't. In 2009, after 4 seasons with Baptist Academy, he was hired by Reed in Philadelphia to join the Eagles as an offensive quality control coach. Just 2 seasons later, he was promoted to quarterbacks coach, which just goes to show you the kind of relationship he had built with Reed in that one season he spent in Philadelphia previously. In 2011, when he was promoted to quarterback coach, he helped Mike Vick to one of the best seasons of his career. He set career high in yardage with 3,303 yards, and he averaged nearly 8 yards per passing attempt. I think it was his second most touchdowns of his career, and one of the best passing seasons overall as a quarterback in the NFL, following a few seasons out of the NFL. Despite this good play in 2011, things kind of fell off in 2012, and they stumbled to a 4-12 record, due in part to injuries to Vic as well as poor play. After 14 seasons for Andy Reid in Philadelphia, he was fired, and along with him went Doug Pederson. Ironically, they both landed on their feet with KC in 2013, the very next season. I knew Pederson would probably follow Reid just because they had developed that connection. I did not expect him to take the offensive coordinator role that quickly in his coaching career. But Reid handed him the offensive coordinator position just 4 years into his NFL coaching career, with his only other 4 years of coaching coming as a high school coach. Although when Pederson was hired, Reid served as the play caller, which kind of buffered the fact that Pederson was so new to being a coordinator. Um, but that would not last long. After 2 seasons serving under Reid as the offensive coordinator without play calling duties, after a 1-5 start in 2015, Doug Pederson assumed play calling duties and led the Chiefs on a 10-game win streak to finish out the season 11-5. This was with Alex Smith still as the quarterback. This was before Patrick Mahomes was drafted, and Alex Smith had one of the better years of his career. And due to this, Doug Pederson was getting head coaching consideration right away. He had the 14-year resume of professional football playing experience, and now he had a total of 10 years of coaching, or 11 years of coaching including 7 years at the NFL level. Um, Due to his experience or his performance as a play caller, not so much his experience as a play caller, became a hot name for teams looking for a new head coach in the 2016 season. And the Eagles jumped all over him as their next head coach following a pretty disastrous end to the Chip Kelly era, despite the fact that he still finished with a 26-21 record after 47 games, and had two 10-6 seasons. Pederson was hired to restore that Andy Reid style culture once again, and in turn, Howie Roseman was restored to making player personnel decisions once again after the power struggle that he had gone through with Chip Kelly, that Chip Kelly had clearly won. Roseman and Pederson immediately started making bold moves, including acquiring the number 2 overall pick in the 2016 draft, which, as we know, went on to be the selection that brought Carson Wentz to Philadelphia. At the time, this was regarded as a win. We all thought that Carson Wentz had the tools to become a franchise quarterback, and none of us were wrong. In fact, we were proven right the following season in 2017 when he would lead Philadelphia to an 11-2 record in 13 games and garner MVP consideration before an injury ended his season and Nick Foles took over on the Super Bowl run. Due to this injury, he allowed Nick Foles to waltz right into Philadelphia Eagles history, winning their first Super Bowl ever. It had been 50 years since the Eagles won an NFL championship at any level, and that was before it was even called the Super Bowl. That's when it was just the NFL before the merger. And due to this, Nick Foles now has a statue that stands outside the Eagles Stadium. Carson Wentz is nowhere to be found outside the Eagles Stadium in that capacity, despite the fact that he just led an MVP level season. Now, I'm not the type of guy who is going to look at the guy next to me at any particular career and wonder why I'm not achieving the heights that he is. Carson Wentz is not that type of guy. Unfortunately, he saw what Nick Foles had done, and he wanted that. He wanted better than that. And unfortunately, it just never panned out for him over the next few seasons. In 2018, Wentz was able to play in just 11 games, but only won 5 of those starts. Again, Nick Foles stepped in and ended up leading the Eagles on a playoff run after 4-1 record in 5 games. Foles would go on to play in the playoffs as well, with Wentz missing the playoffs once again due to an injury. This is 2 years back-to-back that Wentz started the season and ended the season on injured reserve, watching as his backup Nick Foles would play well and lead the Eagles on a playoff run. The following year in 2019, Foles left for Jacksonville to get that big money and get a starting job because he thought once again that he might be capable of being an NFL starter. Ultimately, he was not. He only spent 1 year in Jacksonville. But the Eagles moved on with Josh McCown, who was over 40 years old. Anybody who was paying attention was realizing that this was more of a move for Carson Wentz's ego than anything else. He didn't want Nick Foles sitting on the bench behind him, causing pressure to succeed because Philadelphia Eagles fans believed in Nick Foles and they wanted him as the starter if Wentz was going to continue to play poorly. However, they didn't get their wish. As I said, we moved on with Josh McCown as a guy who, over 40 years old, was not going to take over a starting position from Wentz. He was brought in to be more of a mentor to bring Wentz to the next level, back to that MVP caliber season that he had only a few years ago, and was regarded as a very experienced quarterback and sort of a coach without being a coach, having run quarterback camps since 2013 with his brothers that also played quarterback at a high level. These were kind of the first signs that the Eagles realized that Wentz did not have the mentality to be a franchise quarterback at the NFL level. He felt threatened by Foles and needed that security blanket in Josh McCown instead of Nick Foles to feel secure in his starting role in Philadelphia, which, if you ask me, is a pretty sad circumstance for a guy who was only 2 years removed from an MVP caliber season. If he just focused on himself, and played to the best of his abilities, Foles would have never been a question to replace him as the starter. Never. Uh, Wentz has physical tools that Foles could only dream of. And Foles is nothing more than a game manager that has had successful runs in Philly due to the offense that we run here being suited to what he knows and what he's good at. But that doesn't mean Carson Wentz was ever a bad quarterback for us. He just didn't have the mentality to push through the adversity that he was given year in and year out, whether it was playing with practice squad players or having Nick Foles sit on the bench behind him. However, in 2019, Wentz started 16 games for the first time since his rookie year. He led the Eagles to a 9-7 record, which was enough to get them into the playoffs. Yet he was injured in the playoffs once again. Josh McCown took over, and despite Carson Wentz starting off looking terrible with a 1-4 completion rate, um, McCown took over and completed 75% of his passes. He later had a leg injury that took away any mobility he had, and he still gutted it out for the rest of the game, showing Carson Wentz what a real leader was. Uh, Yet, despite that, in 2020, the Eagles kind of saw the writing on the wall, and I think that's what led them to draft Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts was supposed to be nothing more than an insurance policy in the event that Carson Wentz was injured, and Josh McCown was nothing more than a 40-plus-year-old backup slash coach. Um, he was drafted as a developmental prospect, but following the selection of him in the second round, which was regarded as a reach at the time, Wentz kind of just imploded. He realized that Hurts was drafted high enough to challenge his status as the starter long term, and that if he continued to play less than his abilities, he would be replaced in Philly. Although I believe truly that that was not their intentions upon drafting Hurts. I really think Howie drafted Hurts looking at the way that Payton used Taysom Hill as his backup quarterback. In Philly, we had that veteran quarterback who could come in and play as the starter while Hurts developed and ran package plays throughout the season like he did as a rookie in 2020. Um, Ultimately, though, Wentz just cratered. He led the league in interceptions, turnovers, and sacks through 11 games and was benched, leaving 5 starts for Jalen Hurts, who showed enough promise in 5 games after the disastrous run by Wentz that he was installed as the starter. Uh, Howie Roseman felt comfortable enough to move on from Carson Wentz. But the thing is, we walked into the offseason, and within days, Doug Pederson was fired. So real quickly, it opened up questions on whether or not Carson Wentz would return in Philly. I mean, why else would you fire the coach that he was having problems with um, prior to this and not developing under, more or less, whether it be Wentz's fault or Peterson's fault? Um, if you move on from the coach in this situation, typically you keep the quarterback. That's normally how it goes in the NFL. But this was not that situation. Roseman felt that his culture had been ruined after the past season, so he determined that it was time for him to move on from both. He decided that Carson Wentz needed to go, and he shipped him off to Indianapolis for a conditional 2022 first round pick and a 2021 third round pick. Which is exactly why the Eagles run into 2022's draft with 3 first-round picks, thanks to Miami, who wanted to trade up with us last year. At this point, Jalen Hurts has showed more development in 1 year as a starter and a leader than Carson Wentz showed after his 2017 season. He had a monumental progression from year 1 to year 2, but then after that, it was all downhill. Hurts, to his credit, has continued to progress as the season went along. He progressed in the offseason. It was obvious when he came in and started week 1 that he was not the same quarterback he was in week 17 last year. And with that being said, Carson Wentz and his legacy in Philly will always be tainted by the fact that his mental stability could not handle pressure from another quarterback behind him. Um, Basically, after all this happened, uh, Wentz has continued to bottom out with Indianapolis, proving that Doug Pederson maybe was not the problem in Philadelphia to begin with, which I think actually gave him more interest in head coaching positions in 2022 than he had the previous season. Um, Sporting a 42-37-1 record after 5 seasons in Philadelphia is not terrible. He's got a Super Bowl on his resume as a coach and a player. And now he has been hired by the Jacksonville Jaguars to take over the rebuild process led up by Trent Baalke, a GM that drove away several different candidates for the head coaching position, including former quarterback for Jaguars, Byron Leftwich, who the fans will most likely turn to should Pederson not perform right away. Um, the thing is, I think Pederson might actually be the proper coach to not only deal with Trent Baalke, but to coach Trevor Lawrence to a whole new level in 2022. You saw what he was able to do with Carson Wentz in his second season, and you saw the development that Jalen Hurts had in a very short amount of time under Peterson. And I think um, you can go all the way back to his time with Alex Smith and show that he is just one of those coaches that can find the best in any quarterback given the time to develop that quarterback. The thing is, he's being brought in to Jacksonville to mold an offense with many young players that are about to hit the prime of their career. Whether you're talking about James Robinson, Travis Etienne, Laviska Chanel, or like I said, Trevor Lawrence. They have a stacked roster, so I can see why Doug Pederson has no issue working with Trent Baalke, being that Baalke was the one responsible for all this talent being on the roster. I think that Jacksonville's actually a really good landing spot in terms of a veteran coach. If you're the type of guy that can deal with a GM over your shoulder, picking your players and telling you what's going to happen as far as player personnel decisions, then it's going to be a fine matchup in Jacksonville. And I truly believe that. I think Peterson has a mindset to where he just wants to coach. He's not worried about all the drama behind the scenes with the player personnel decisions like he had to be in Philadelphia because Roseman brought him into it. But in Jacksonville, I believe that he will just focus on coaching and let Baalke pick the players because he's already got a quarterback that he knows he can count on. He's already got running game that he can lean on, and he's already got a wide receiver who I believe could be a true number one at this level and a dangerous threat in the run game should he choose as well. Um, if Doug Pederson leads the Jacksonville Jaguars to a winning record in 2022, this will cement his legacy as a head coach in the NFL. He already led a quick turnaround in Philadelphia, one that none of us saw coming that quickly. If he can do the same in Jacksonville, it will do wonders for his reputation following the disastrous end to his Eagles run. I think Carson Wentz is already doing him a bunch of favors, but Peterson can really drive home the ball here if he knocks it out of the park in Jacksonville, which I think he will. He's got a lot of talent to work with there, and there's no reason whatsoever to think he will not be successful in this run, short of Trent Baalke, which I honestly think Trent Baalke is going to be on a shorter leash than Peterson going forward. Peterson has a resume. Baalke has somewhat of a resume, but he's also got all this negative energy coming towards him from all these outside coaching candidates that would never come there. Shad Khan will not deal with that going forward if decides he has to replace Doug Pederson. He is going to end up getting rid of Baalke before he gets rid of Peterson, or he'll get rid of them both at the same time in order to start anew. So coaches aren't looking at him like, how can you keep Baalke after 2 unsuccessful coaching runs? Um, but at the end of the day, I'm a big fan of Doug Pederson. I didn't know how to feel about him when he was hired in Philadelphia after 1 year as a play caller, but he proved me wrong. He did a great job, especially considering the fact that we all know now that Carson Wentz was never going to be the franchise quarterback we thought he was. And in turn, Peterson never truly got that chance with the right kind of guy. Now he gets that chance with Trevor Lawrence, who it has that mentality to overcome any obstacle in his way to be the starter, to be the guy that the franchise is leaning on going forward and will need to succeed in order to be any sort of successful team. Um, I just really think that Doug Pederson is meant to be successful at the NFL level as a head coach. And I know a lot of times guys who are good people don't necessarily succeed at the NFL level, but Peterson is going to be one of those guys that's going to succeed, and he's going to succeed much the same way Andy Reid has succeeded by winning the players over to be a fan of him, by being a player's coach first, which he did in Philadelphia pretty well. I think going forward in Jacksonville, we will see a rather quick turnaround, although I don't believe we will see a winning season in year one. I do think that we will see a win improvement, especially being that he's got high draft picks and a lot of cap space to work with this offseason. And I ultimately think that we will see him produce a winning record in Jacksonville over the next 2 or 3 years, assuming he gets the time to actually build a roster and develop the players that he's been given. Um, Ultimately, that's all I've got for you guys today. I hope you liked what you heard. Like I said, Doug Pederson is back. I don't know how you guys feel about it from Philadelphia as Eagles fans, but I'm a big fan. I don't think he should have ever been fired in Philadelphia to begin with, and I think that had more to do with Carson Wentz than it did Doug Pederson. I would have been interested to see what Pederson would have been able to do with Hurts long term, but we are where we are now, and Nick Sirianni proved me wrong as well. I was not a big fan of the hire at the time, but yet in his first season, he led a playoff run. So I look forward to more success with him at the helm as well. And we live in a world where, luckily for me, Andy Reid, Doug Pederson, and Nick Sirianni can all be successful without interfering with each other. So it should be an interesting 22 season to watch. I, for one, am excited to see what Peterson can do with Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne, James Robinson, and Laviska Shenault, like I mentioned before, as well as other guys, Dan Arnold, and a couple other guys that I'm blanking at the top of my head. Um, Long story short, I'm glad you took the time out to watch this video. If you like it, drop a like, subscribe, comment below. Let me know what you think on this situation. And we will talk about more subjects coming forward. We still got 4 open positions in the NFL, and I still have 5 more coaches to break down in the USFL. If you like Canadian Football League content, I just started writing for CFLNewsHub.com, and you can find my articles there, as well as the Gate City Sports Talk webpage, where you can find merch, video, and articles regarding the Philadelphia Eagles. Once again, I appreciate your time being with me here today, and I hope you liked what you heard. Have a great day.